Are we done yet?
How could you take my daughter away from me?
You can't prove it, so...
Order in the cut! Order! Cut!
The courtroom in Manchester Crown Court felt suffocating despite its high ceilings and large windows. It was late October, and the British autumn rain hammered against the glass in rhythmic sheets, creating a melancholic soundtrack to the proceedings unfolding inside. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting a clinical glow over the oak-paneled walls and the faces of everyone gathered to witness what was being called the trial of the year by British tabloids. Welcome to Dark Echoes Crime, where we expose the darkest secrets hidden behind closed doors, the crimes that shatter perfect facades, and the justice that finally catches up to those who think they're untouchable. If you're here for stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the people around you, hit that subscribe button, because today's story will haunt you. At the defense table sat 17-year-old Olivia Ashworth, her posture perfect, her blonde hair pulled into an elegant low bun that suggested maturity beyond her years. She wore a navy blue dress with a white collar, an outfit carefully selected by her legal team to project innocence and respectability. Her hands were folded demurely in her lap, and her expression was one of composed sadness, not the demeanor of someone accused of orchestrating the death of a classmate, but rather of a girl wrongfully caught up in a terrible tragedy. Next to her sat her mother, Catherine Ashworth, a woman who radiated the particular brand of British upper-middle-class composure that came from generations of keeping calm and carrying on. Catherine's designer handbag sat precisely at her feet, her posture ramrod straight, her face carefully neutral despite the whispers from the gallery behind them. Her husband, James Ashworth, a partner at a prestigious London law firm, had taken a leave of absence to be present for every moment of the trial, and he sat on Olivia's other side, occasionally placing a protective hand on his daughter's shoulder. Olivia's defense attorney, Lydia Pemberton, was a legend in British criminal defense circles. She was in her late 50s, with silver-gray hair cut in a sharp bob, and she wore black-framed glasses that she had a habit of removing for dramatic effect. Pemberton had successfully defended everyone from politicians caught in corruption scandals to celebrities accused of assault. Her specialty was creating reasonable doubt where none seemed to exist, and she'd agreed to take Olivia's case pro bono after being personally approached by James Ashworth, who'd gone to Cambridge with Pemberton's husband. Across the aisle, the prosecution table told a different story entirely. Crown Prosecutor Martin Fletcher was a bulldog of a man in his early 40s, with thinning red hair and the kind of determined expression that suggested he'd rather die than lose a case. He'd built his career prosecuting violent crimes and had a particular passion for cases involving young victims. Next to him sat his junior prosecutor, a sharp young woman named Priya Sharma, who'd been instrumental in building the case against Olivia. And sitting in the gallery in the front row on the prosecution's side was the family that had been destroyed by the events of March 14th, David and Susan Chen and their 12-year-old son Alex. They were there to represent their daughter, 16-year-old Lily Chen, who would never sit in a courtroom, never graduate from school, never grow old. Lily had died 5 months ago, and the prosecution alleged that her death was not the suicide it had initially appeared to be, but rather a carefully orchestrated murder masterminded by the seemingly perfect girl sitting calmly at the defense table. Judge Patricia Harrington entered the courtroom with the traditional call of "All rise," her red robes flowing behind her. She was a veteran judge known for her sharp intellect and intolerance for theatrics. She presided over some of the most high-profile cases in Manchester's recent history, and she ran her courtroom with military precision. "Please be seated," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent 30 years commanding respect in legal proceedings. "We're here today in the matter of the Crown versus Olivia Catherine Ashworth. The defendant is charged with murder, conspiracy to cause harm, and perverting the course of justice. Miss Ashworth, do you understand the charges against you?" Olivia stood, her movements graceful and controlled. "Yes, Your Honor." "How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor." Her voice was clear, confident, with the precisely enunciated vowels of someone who'd attended expensive schools and had likely had elocution lessons as a child. The words seemed to hang in the air. From the gallery, Susan Chen let out a small, broken sound, not quite a sob, more like a moan of pain, before her husband wrapped his arm around her shoulders, whispering something soothing into her ear. "Miss Pemberton, is the defense ready to proceed?" Judge Harrington asked. "Yes, Your Honor." "Mr. Fletcher, you may present your opening statement." Martin Fletcher stood, buttoning his suit jacket, and walked slowly toward the jury box. The jury was diverse. 6 women, 6 men, ranging in age from early 20s to late 60s, representing various ethnic backgrounds and presumably various perspectives on life, death, and the capacity of teenage girls for calculated cruelty. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Fletcher began, his Manchester accent adding an everyman quality to his delivery that contrasted sharply with the posh accents of the defense team. Over the next several weeks, you're going to hear a story that will disturb you deeply. Not because it involves guns or knives or traditional weapons of violence, but because it involves something far more insidious. Psychological manipulation culminating in the death of a vulnerable 16-year-old girl. He paused, letting his words settle. Lily Chen was a student at St. Catherine's Academy, one of the most prestigious independent schools in Greater Manchester. She was intelligent, creative, and sensitive, perhaps too sensitive for the environment she found herself in. Lily struggled with anxiety and depression, conditions she was actively treating with therapy and medication. She had a close-knit family who loved her deeply. And she had a best friend, or so she thought, named Olivia Ashworth. Fletcher gestured toward the defense table. Several jurors' eyes followed his gesture, studying Olivia, who met their gaze with a sad, sympathetic expression that suggested she too mourned the loss of her friend. Olivia and Lily had been friends since they were 11 years old, when they both started at St. Catherine's. They were inseparable, or so everyone believed. They had sleepovers, shared secrets, spent hours together. But sometime around January of this year, something changed. Lily started dating a boy named Oliver Matthews, and Oliver Matthews was someone Olivia wanted for herself. Fletcher pulled up a photograph on the courtroom's display screen. It showed Lily and Oliver together, both smiling at what appeared to be a school dance. Lily was petite, with long black hair and delicate features, wearing a simple blue dress. Oliver was tall, athletic, with the kind of effortless good looks that made him popular at school. Now, you might think this is just typical teenage drama. Jealousy over a boy, hurt feelings, perhaps the end of a friendship. But Olivia Ashworth didn't simply stop being friends with Lily. She didn't just move on and find other friends, other boys to date. Instead, she embarked on a systematic campaign to destroy Lily Chen's mental health, to isolate her from her support systems, to drive her to a point of such desperation that Lily would take her own life. Several jurors shifted uncomfortably. One older woman in the back row looked horrified. The evidence will show that Olivia created fake social media accounts to send Lily cruel, threatening messages. She spread rumors throughout the school that Lily had cheated on Oliver, that she'd stolen from other students, that she was mentally unstable and dangerous. She manipulated Lily's other friends into excluding her, turning Lily's social circle against her one person at a time. And most damningly, she planted suggestions in Lily's mind, through carefully worded text messages and conversations, that the world would be better off without her, that suicide was the only escape from the pain she was experiencing. Fletcher's voice grew harder, more prosecutorial. On the evening of March 14th, Lily Chen hanged herself in her bedroom. Her 12-year-old brother found her. Can you imagine that? A 12-year-old child walking into his sister's room and discovering her body? The trauma of that moment will haunt Alex Chen for the rest of his life. Alex Chen, sitting between his parents, stared down at his hands. He'd lost weight since his sister's death, his clothes hanging loosely on his small frame, his face gaunt and pale. Initially, Lily's death was treated as a tragic suicide. A heartbreaking loss but not a crime. Lily had a history of mental health struggles. She'd left a suicide note. There were no signs of foul play. The coroner ruled it a suicide and the case was closed. But then, 3 weeks after Lily's death, a student at St. Catherine's Academy came forward with information that changed everything. Fletcher pulled up another image, a screenshot of a text message conversation. This student, we'll call her Witness A to protect her privacy, had been one of Olivia's friends. After Lily's death, as she was going through old messages on her phone, she found a conversation from February where Olivia had explicitly stated her intention to make Lily kill herself. The exact words were, "I'm going to destroy her so completely that she'll have no choice but to end it. And everyone will just think she was too fragile to handle life." Perfect crime. The courtroom was silent except for the rain against the windows. Several jurors were staring at Olivia with naked shock. She kept her expression carefully controlled, but a slight tremor in her hands betrayed her tension. Witness A immediately reported this to the police, who reopened the investigation. What they found was a trail of digital evidence showing a months-long campaign of psychological torture. Fake accounts, manipulated photographs, coordinated exclusion, and most chillingly, text messages from Olivia to Lily explicitly encouraging her to commit suicide. Messages like, everyone would be happier if you were gone, and you're too weak to live in this world, and, do everyone a favor and just disappear. Fletcher paused, letting the horror of those messages sink in. Now the defense will argue that these were just words. That Olivia didn't physically kill Lily, that Lily made the ultimate choice herself, that you can't hold someone criminally responsible for another person's decision to commit suicide. But ladies and gentlemen, the law recognizes that there are some circumstances where encouraging suicide crosses the line from protected speech into criminal conduct. And the evidence will show that Olivia Ashworth didn't just passively allow Lily to sink into depression. She actively, deliberately, systematically pushed Lily toward death. He returned to stand directly in front of the jury box. Over the course of this trial, you'll hear from Lily's family, her therapist, her other friends. You'll hear from digital forensics experts who traced the fake accounts back to devices Olivia controlled. You'll hear from witnesses who overheard Olivia bragging about her plan to get rid of Lily. And you'll read Lily's own words, messages and journal entries where she described feeling like she was going crazy, like everyone hated her, like there was no escape from the torment she was experiencing. Fletcher picked up a leather-bound journal from the prosecution table and held it up. This is Lily's diary. In the weeks before her death, her entries become increasingly dark, increasingly desperate. But interspersed with her own thoughts are passages she copied down, song lyrics, poetry, quotes that spoke to her pain. And one of those songs, a song that Lily listened to repeatedly in her final days, contains lyrics that will prove to be the key to understanding exactly how Olivia orchestrated Lily's death and very nearly got away with it. He set the journal down carefully, reverently. The defense will ask you to see Olivia Ashworth as a victim herself, a teenage girl caught up in ordinary drama that tragically ended in suicide. But the evidence will show you the truth, that Olivia Ashworth is a calculating, manipulative individual who decided that if she couldn't have Oliver Matthews, then Lily Chen didn't deserve to live. And she used her intelligence, her understanding of Lily's vulnerabilities, and the tools of social media to commit the perfect murder, or what would have been the perfect murder, if not for one brave student who came forward, and one set of song lyrics that revealed the full extent of Olivia's plan. Fletcher returned to his seat, and the weight of his words settled over the courtroom like a heavy fog. Judge Harrington looked at the defense table. Miss Pemberton, your opening statement. Lydia Pemberton stood with practiced elegance, smoothing her barrister's gown before approaching the jury. Where Fletcher had been passionate and prosecutorial, Pemberton was cool and rational, her voice carrying the cultured tones of someone educated at Oxford. Ladies and gentlemen, my colleague Mr. Fletcher has just painted a very dramatic picture for you. A picture of a calculating teenage murderess who systematically drove her best friend to suicide out of jealousy over a boy. It's a compelling narrative. It would make an excellent television drama. But it has one fatal flaw. It isn't true. She walked slowly along the jury box, making eye contact with each juror. Olivia Ashworth is not a murderer. She's a 17-year-old girl who lost her best friend to suicide. A traumatic experience that has devastated her just as much as it has devastated the Chen family. She's been vilified in the press, threatened on social media, forced to leave school, and now faces the possibility of spending the majority of her adult life in prison for a crime she didn't commit. Pemberton pulled up a different photograph on the screen. Olivia and Lily together, both smiling, arms around each other's shoulders, clearly happy. This is the real relationship between Olivia and Lily. They were genuinely close friends. They supported each other through difficult times. Yes, their friendship became strained when Lily started dating Oliver Matthews. Yes, there was jealousy and hurt feelings, because that's what happens when teenagers navigate complicated romantic situations. But hurt feelings are not the same as homicidal intent. She clicked to another image, a screenshot of a text message from Olivia to Lily that read, "I'm here for you always no matter what. You're stronger than you think." This is also from Olivia to Lily, sent just 2 weeks before Lily's death. Does this sound like someone trying to drive their friend to suicide? Or does it sound like someone trying to be supportive during a difficult time? Several jurors looked uncertain now. Pemberton had planted the first seeds of doubt. The prosecution wants you to believe that Olivia created fake social media accounts to harass Lily. But the evidence will show that while fake accounts did send messages to Lily, there's no definitive proof that Olivia controlled those accounts. Anyone could have created them. Other students at St. Catherine's, random internet trolls, even Lily herself as part of a cry for help. Digital forensics are not nearly as precise as the prosecution would have you believe. She moved to address the elephant in the room. And yes, there are text messages from Olivia that, taken out of context, sound harsh. But context matters. These were private conversations between teenage girls navigating complicated emotions. When Olivia wrote, "Everyone would be happier if you were gone," she was expressing frustration with Lily's behavior in that moment, the way a friend might say you're being impossible, without literally meaning the person is incapable of anything. Teenage hyperbole is not criminal intent. Pemberton's voice took on a more somber tone. The tragedy here is that Lily Chen was suffering from severe depression and anxiety, conditions that were not caused by Olivia, but by chemical imbalances in Lily's brain. Lily was on medication. She was seeing a therapist. Her parents knew she was struggling. And despite everyone's best efforts, despite the love of her family and the support of her friends, Lily made the heartbreaking decision to end her own life. That is not murder. That is tragedy. She walked back toward the defense table, standing behind Olivia and placing a hand on her client's shoulder. Olivia has to live with the fact that her friend is gone. She has to live with the guilt of wondering if she could have done more, said something different, been a better friend. That's a burden she'll carry for the rest of her life. But guilt is not the same as legal culpability. And the prosecution's case, stripped of its emotional appeals and media sensationalism, fails to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Olivia Ashworth committed any crime. Pemberton addressed the jury directly. "I ask you to listen carefully to the evidence. Question the prosecution's assumptions. Demand actual proof rather than speculation and innuendo. And when you've heard everything, when you've carefully considered all the facts, I'm confident you'll reach the only just verdict, not guilty." She returned to her seat, and Olivia reached over to squeeze her hand gratefully. The gesture was calculated to appear spontaneous, but Pemberton had coached Olivia extensively on these small moments of performance that could influence jury perception. Judge Harrington checked her notes. "We'll take a 15-minute recess before the prosecution calls its first witness." The gavel came down and the courtroom erupted in hushed whispers. Journalists in the gallery frantically typed notes into their phones and laptops. The Chen family remained seated, Susan still gripping her husband's hand so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Olivia stood and stretched slightly, her composure never cracking. She leaned toward her mother and whispered something that made Catherine nod and produce a tissue from her handbag. A performance of distress but controlled, measured. Everything about Olivia was controlled. In the corridor during the recess, Martin Fletcher conferred with Priya Sharma, reviewing their witness order. "We start with David Chen," Fletcher said. "Establish Lily as a real person, a beloved daughter, not just a name in court documents. Then we bring in the school counselor to talk about the bullying reports. Save the digital forensics expert for day 2. What about the song lyrics?" Priya asked. "When do we introduce that evidence?" "Not yet. Let's build the foundation first. The relationship between Olivia and Lily, the deterioration, the suicide. Then, when we bring in witness A to testify about the text messages, that's when we reveal the song connection. Maximum impact." "Pemberton's good," Priya observed. "She's already creating doubt about the fake accounts." "She is good," Fletcher agreed. "But we have evidence she can't explain away. We just need to present it systematically, methodically. This jury needs to see the full picture before they can understand how the song lyrics fit." Across the hallway, Lydia Pemberton had her own strategic discussion with the Ashworth family. "The prosecution's going to try to make you cry," she told Olivia bluntly. "They're going to show photos of Lily, play recordings of her voice, describe her body being found by her little brother. Your job is to show appropriate sadness without looking guilty. Tears are acceptable, you lost a friend. But not too many tears or the jury will wonder what you're really crying about." "I understand," Olivia said, her voice steady. "And whatever happens, whatever evidence they present, you maintain your composure. No outbursts. No shocked expressions. You knew Lily better than anyone. Nothing the prosecution says should surprise you because you were there for all of it." "Understood. Understood." Catherine Ashworth spoke up. "Is it true what the prosecutor said? About text messages where Olivia encouraged Lily to kill herself?" Pemberton and Olivia exchanged a glance. "There are messages that can be interpreted that way if you're looking for guilt. But context matters, and we'll provide that context when the time comes." "Olivia, you didn't actually," Catherine began. "Mum, please," Olivia interrupted gently. "Miss Pemberton knows what she's doing. We need to trust her." It was a deflection, not an answer. Catherine noticed, but James placed a warning hand on her arm and she fell silent. Court reconvened and the prosecution called its first witness, David Chen, Lily's father. David Chen was a man who looked like he'd aged a decade in 5 months. His hair had gone gray at the temples, new lines etched deep around his eyes and mouth. He wore a dark suit that hung loosely on his frame, weight loss from grief making the clothes he'd owned before his daughter's death fit poorly. He walked to the witness box with slow, deliberate steps, as if each movement required conscious effort. After being sworn in, he sat down, his hands folded tightly in his lap, and looked at Martin Fletcher with the hollow eyes of someone who'd seen too much. "Mr. Chen," Fletcher began gently, "thank you for being here today. I know this is incredibly difficult." David nodded but said nothing. "Can you tell the jury about your daughter, Lily?" David's voice, when he spoke, was hoarse as if he hadn't used it in days. She was special. Creative. She loved music, loved writing poetry. She was sensitive, felt things deeply. When she was happy, she lit up the whole room. When she was sad. He trailed off, struggling. "Take your time," Fletcher said. David took a shaky breath. "When she was sad, it was like watching someone drown. We tried everything to help her. Therapy, medication, family activities. Some days were better than others. But she was fighting. She was trying to get better." "When did Lily start attending St. Catherine's Academy?" "When she was 11. She'd done well on the entrance exam, and we thought a good school would give her opportunities. She was excited about it, and for the first few years she seemed to thrive there. She made friends. Her grades were excellent. She joined the creative writing club and the school choir." "When did things start to change?" "Around January of this year. She started coming home quieter. She'd go straight to her room. She stopped talking about school, stopped mentioning her friends. When we asked what was wrong, she'd say nothing or that she was just tired." "Did she mention Olivia Ashworth during this time?" David's jaw tightened. "She used to talk about Olivia all the time. They'd been best friends for years. But starting in January she stopped mentioning her. When I asked if she'd had a fight with Olivia, she just said they were growing apart. I didn't push. I thought it was normal teenage stuff." "Did Lily's mental health decline during this period?" "Yes. She started missing doses of her medication, or at least we thought she was missing doses. Later we found out she'd been taking it religiously, but her doctor was concerned because she seemed to be getting worse instead of better. She stopped eating properly. She lost weight. She started having panic attacks before school. We scheduled more frequent therapy sessions, but nothing seemed to help." Fletcher pulled up a photograph of Lily taken in December, healthy, smiling at a family Christmas dinner. Then a photograph from early March, just weeks before her death. The difference was shocking. Lily's face was gaunt, her eyes shadowed, her smile forced and brittle. "Can you describe the day of March 14th? David's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down his cheeks, but he pushed forward, determined to tell his daughter's story. "It was a Wednesday. Lily had stayed home from school that day. She said she wasn't feeling well. Susan had to work, so it was just me home with Lily and Alex. I checked on Lily around lunchtime. She seemed flat, emotionless. I asked if she wanted to talk, but she said no. I made her promise to come down for dinner." He paused, wiping his eyes with a tissue Fletcher provided. "At 6 o'clock I called her for dinner. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. So I sent Alex up to get her. And then I heard him screaming." The courtroom was utterly silent. Even the journalist had stopped typing, transfixed by David's testimony. "I ran upstairs. Alex was in the hallway, screaming, pointing at Lily's room. I went in and I saw." He couldn't continue. His whole body shook with sobs. Judge Harrington spoke gently. "Mr. Chen, would you like a moment?" David shook his head. "No. I need to say this. I saw my daughter hanging from her ceiling fan. I cut her down, tried CPR, but she was already gone. She was already cold. She'd been dead for hours, and I'd been downstairs watching television while my baby girl died alone in her room." Several jurors were crying now. One woman in the front row covered her mouth with her hand. Even the court reporter looked stricken. "Mr. Chen, I'm so sorry," Fletcher said quietly. "Just a few more questions. Did Lily leave a note?" "Yes. It was on her desk. It said, 'I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. The world is better off without me. Tell Alex I love him.'" "Did that note mention Olivia or anyone else specifically?" "No. It was short. Generic. Like she'd looked up suicide note templates online and copied one. That wasn't like Lily. She was a writer. If she'd written a genuine note, it would have been pages long, explaining everything she felt. But this was just empty." Fletcher introduced the note into evidence, and copies were distributed to the jury. Several jurors read it with furrowed brows, perhaps thinking the same thing David had observed, that it didn't sound personal or genuine. After Lily's death, did you find anything on her computer or phone that concerned you? We couldn't access her phone, she'd changed the password and we didn't know it. But on her computer we found her Spotify account was open. She'd been listening to one song on repeat, hundreds of times in the days before she died. A song called Shatter, by a band called Echo Bloom. Did you listen to this song? Yes. It's about feeling broken, about wanting to disappear, about not being able to bear the weight of living. Dark lyrics. The kind of thing a depressed teenager would gravitate to. Did you think anything was suspicious about Lily's death at that time? No. We were devastated, but we accepted it was suicide. Lily had mental health issues. She'd been struggling. It seemed like a tragic but understandable outcome. It wasn't until the police contacted us 3 weeks later that we learned someone had been deliberately pushing her toward this. Fletcher nodded. Thank you, Mr. Chen. I have no further questions. Lydia Pemberton stood for cross-examination. This was delicate. She couldn't appear to be attacking a grieving father, but she needed to establish certain facts for her defense. Mr. Chen, first let me say how sorry I am for your loss. I have children of my own, and I cannot imagine your pain. David said nothing, just watched her warily. You testified that Lily had been diagnosed with depression and anxiety. When was that diagnosis made? About 2 years ago when she was 14. And she'd been on medication for those conditions? Yes. Sertraline. An SSRI. Had she ever expressed suicidal thoughts before March of this year? David hesitated. She'd mentioned it once or twice to her therapist. But the therapist said it wasn't uncommon for depressed teenagers to have passing thoughts about death without serious intent. So this wasn't the first time Lily had contemplated suicide? It wasn't the first time she'd thought about it, but it was the first time she'd ever acted on it. You testified that Lily stopped mentioning Olivia starting in January. Did you ever see any direct evidence that Olivia was mistreating Lily, or was it an assumption based on the fact that they'd grown apart? I never witnessed anything directly, no. But Lily was different after January. Something had changed. Teenage friendships change frequently, don't they? Best friends 1 month, barely speaking the next. Objection, Fletcher called out. Calls for speculation. Sustained. Miss Pemberton, stick to questions Mr. Chen can answer based on his own knowledge. Pemberton nodded. Mr. Chen, you mentioned finding that Lily had been listening to a song called Shatter repeatedly. Did you find evidence that Olivia had recommended this song to Lily? Not that I'm aware of. Is it possible Lily found this song on her own, that it resonated with her depression, and that's why she listened to it repeatedly? I suppose it's possible. You also mentioned that Lily's suicide note seemed generic, not in her usual writing style. Is it possible that in her final moments, overwhelmed by depression, she simply couldn't find the words to express what she was feeling, so she kept it brief? David's face hardened. Or someone told her what to write to make it look like a simple suicide. Objection, speculation, Pemberton said quickly. Sustained. Pemberton knew she'd gotten what she needed, establishing that Lily had a pre-existing mental health condition, that there was no direct evidence Olivia had recommended the song, and that the friendship ending could have been normal teenage drama. Small victories, but they added up to reasonable doubt. No further questions, Your Honor. David Chen stepped down from the witness box, and his wife Susan immediately wrapped him in her arms, both of them crying quietly. The jury watched with sympathy, but they'd also heard Pemberton's cross-examination, and some of them looked less certain now about whether this was really murder or just tragedy. The prosecution's next witness was Dr. Eleanor Morrison, Lily's therapist. Dr. Morrison was in her mid-50s, with graying brown hair and the calm, measured demeanor of someone who'd spent decades hearing people's darkest thoughts and helping them find paths through their pain. She testified about her sessions with Lily, carefully navigating the boundaries of therapist-client confidentiality while providing relevant information for the case. Lily began seeing me in October 2 years ago, shortly after her diagnosis of major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder, Dr. Morrison explained. Initially we met weekly. As she stabilized on medication, we reduced to bi-weekly sessions. Can you describe Lily's mental state during your time treating her? Fletcher asked. Lily struggled with intrusive negative thoughts, social anxiety, and periods of deep sadness. But she was also resilient. She had coping strategies. She journaled, she used breathing techniques, she had a support system. For most of the time I worked with her, while she had difficult days, she also had many good days. Did that change at any point? Yes. Starting in late January of this year, Lily's sessions became more intense. She reported feeling like everyone at school hated her, that she couldn't trust anyone, that she was being watched and judged constantly. She started having more frequent panic attacks. She expressed feelings of worthlessness and hopelessness that were more severe than anything she'd experienced before. Did she mention any specific person who was causing these feelings? Not initially. She was vague about who or what had changed. But in our session on February 28th, she mentioned that her former best friend was ruining her life. When I asked her to elaborate, she said this friend had turned everyone against her, was spreading rumors, was making her school life unbearable. Did she name this friend? She said Olivia. She didn't provide a last name, but given that Olivia Ashworth had been her closest friend for years, I assumed that's who she meant. Did you report this information to anyone? I contacted Lily's parents and suggested they speak with the school about potential bullying. I also adjusted Lily's treatment plan, increasing the frequency of our sessions to weekly again, and I consulted with her psychiatrist about potentially adjusting her medication. In your professional opinion, what was Lily's mental state in the weeks before her death? Dr. Morrison's expression was pained. She was in crisis. She was experiencing what we call active suicidal ideation, not just passing thoughts about death but specific thoughts about methods and timing. I was very concerned. I implemented a safety plan with her and her parents. But ultimately, I underestimated how urgent the situation was. Did Lily ever mention anyone encouraging her to commit suicide? Not explicitly. But in our final session, 5 days before her death, she said something that's haunted me ever since. She said, "Maybe everyone's right. Maybe I should just disappear." Did you ask her what she meant by everyone? I did. She said, all the voices, the messages, the looks, everyone telling me I don't belong here. I interpreted it at the time as her depression distorting her perception of reality, a common symptom where neutral interactions are perceived as hostile. But in retrospect, I wonder if she was being more literal than I realized. Fletcher introduced several pages from Dr. Morrison's session notes into evidence, carefully redacted to protect Lily's privacy while showing the deterioration of her mental health from January through March. Dr. Morrison, based on your professional experience, is it possible for someone's mental health to deteriorate this rapidly purely due to internal factors, or would external stressors typically be involved? While depression can worsen on its own, a deterioration this rapid and severe usually indicates significant external stressors. Something was happening in Lily's life that was overwhelming her coping mechanisms. Thank you. No further questions. Lydia Pemberton approached for cross-examination, her expression sympathetic but professional. Dr. Morrison, you testified that Lily mentioned someone named Olivia was ruining her life. Did she provide any specific examples of what Olivia was doing? She mentioned rumors being spread and people excluding her from social groups. Did she provide evidence of these rumors? Names of people who were excluding her? No. She was vague about specifics. Is it possible that in her depressed state, Lily was misinterpreting normal social dynamics as deliberate persecution? Dr. Morrison hesitated. It's possible. Depression can distort perception. But Lily was usually quite grounded in reality when it came to distinguishing between her depression talking and actual external events. But you acknowledged earlier that she said she felt like everyone was against her, which suggests some level of distorted thinking. Correct. That's fair. Dr. Morrison, you mentioned that you implemented a safety plan in the weeks before Lily's death. What did that plan entail? Lily agreed to call a crisis hotline if she felt in immediate danger. She agreed to remove potential means of self-harm from her environment. Her parents agreed to increase supervision. We scheduled emergency sessions if needed. So there were interventions in place designed to prevent exactly what happened? Yes. But those interventions failed not because they were inadequate, but because Lily chose not to follow the safety plan. Is that correct? Dr. Morrison looked uncomfortable. Lily made a choice in a moment of crisis that we'd hoped to prevent, yes. A choice she made herself, not a choice someone else made for her? Objection, Fletcher interjected. Whether Lily physically caused her own death is not in dispute. The question is whether someone else is criminally responsible for driving her to that point. Sustained. Move on, Miss Pemberton. Dr. Morrison, you've been a therapist for over 20 years. How many of your patients with depression and anxiety have experienced deterioration in their mental health due to normal teenage social conflicts, friendship breakups, romantic disappointments, social exclusion? Many. It's quite common. And in your professional opinion, is there a clear line between a teenager experiencing normal social cruelty from peers and a teenager being deliberately driven to suicide? Dr. Morrison thought carefully before answering. It's a spectrum, not a clear line. Most teenage cruelty is thoughtless rather than calculated. But there are cases where the behavior crosses into what we'd consider psychological abuse. But distinguishing between thoughtless cruelty and calculated abuse requires knowledge of the perpetrator's intent, doesn't it? And as a therapist, you only had access to Lily's perception of events, not the objective reality or Olivia's intentions. That's correct. So you can't testify with certainty that what Lily experienced was calculated psychological abuse rather than typical, albeit painful, teenage social dynamics? I can testify that Lily experienced something that severely damaged her mental health. Whether it was calculated or not is beyond my purview as her therapist. Thank you, Dr. Morrison. No further questions. It was a strategic cross-examination. Pemberton wasn't trying to discredit Dr. Morrison or suggest Lily hadn't suffered. She was simply establishing that suffering alone didn't prove criminal intent on Olivia's part. The jury needed to see that while Lily's death was tragic, tragedy didn't automatically equal murder. The trial proceeded over the next several days with additional witnesses. The prosecution called students from St. Catherine's Academy who testified about the social dynamics between Olivia and Lily, the deterioration of their friendship, and rumors they'd heard about Olivia spreading malicious gossip about Lily. One student, a girl named Charlotte Winters, provided particularly damaging testimony. I was in the bathroom between classes in February, Charlotte said, her voice shaking slightly with nervousness at being in court. I heard Olivia talking to two other girls. I was in the stall so they didn't know I was there. Olivia was laughing about something and she said, Charlotte paused looking at the judge. Do I have to use her exact words? Please do, Judge Harrington instructed. Charlotte took a deep breath. She said, Lily's so pathetic. She actually thinks people like her. I've turned basically everyone against her and she still hasn't figured out it was me. This is easier than I thought. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Harrington's gavel came down sharply. Order. Are you certain those were her exact words? Fletcher asked. Yes. I wrote them down later because I thought they were cruel. I showed my mom and she said I should mind my own business. Did you report this conversation to anyone at school? No. I was scared. Olivia was popular. I didn't want her to turn on me next. On cross-examination, Pemberton tried to undermine Charlotte's credibility. Miss Winters, how long were you in that bathroom stall? Maybe 5 minutes? And you remember a conversation from 8 months ago word for word? I remember those specific words because they shocked me. But you admit you wrote them down later. How much later? That evening. So not immediately. You relied on your memory for several hours before writing anything down. Yes, but... Miss Winters, have you ever said something unkind about another student and then regretted it later? Charlotte hesitated. I suppose. So it's possible that Olivia said something thoughtless in a moment of frustration, and you've remembered it in its most damning possible form? I don't think so. She sounded like she was proud of what she was doing. It was solid testimony, but Pemberton had planted enough doubt that some jurors might discount it as exaggerated teenage drama. The prosecution also called Lily's then-boyfriend, Oliver Matthews. Oliver was 18 now, having graduated from St. Catherine's over the summer. He was athletic and handsome, but he carried himself with visible discomfort, clearly wishing he were anywhere but testifying in a murder trial. Oliver, how long did you date Lily Chen? Fletcher asked. About 6 weeks. From mid-January through February. How did your relationship with Lily begin? We'd been friends for a while. We had chemistry class together. I asked her to the winter formal, and after that we started dating officially. How did Olivia Ashworth react to you dating Lily? Oliver shifted uncomfortably. She wasn't happy about it. Olivia and I had kissed once at a party in December, but it didn't mean anything. We were both drunk and I didn't want to date her. When she found out I was dating Lily, she got really cold toward both of us. Did Olivia ever explicitly express jealousy or anger about your relationship with Lily? She sent me a few texts saying I'd made a mistake, that Lily wasn't good for me, that kind of thing. I ignored them. Why did your relationship with Lily end? Oliver looked down at his hands. People started saying things about Lily. That she was cheating on me, that she'd stolen from other students, that she was unstable. I started hearing these rumors from multiple people, and I didn't know what to believe. Lily denied everything, but there was all this Smoke, you know? And I was 18 and stupid, and instead of trusting her, I broke up with her. Do you know who started those rumors? At the time, no. But after Lily died, when people started coming forward with information, I heard that Olivia had been the source of most of them. She'd tell one person something and they'd tell others, and it spread. By the time it got back to me, it seemed like everyone was saying these things about Lily, so I thought they must be true. How did Lily react when you broke up with her? Oliver's voice cracked. She was devastated. She begged me to believe her, said the rumors weren't true. She was crying so hard she could barely talk. I felt terrible, but I told her I needed space. That was the last real conversation we had. 3 weeks later, she was dead. Do you feel responsible for her death? Objection, Pemberton called out. The witness's feelings are not relevant. I'll allow it, Judge Harrington ruled. The witness may answer. Oliver looked directly at the jury. Every day. I feel responsible every single day. If I'd trusted her, if I'd stood by her instead of believing gossip, maybe she'd still be alive. But I didn't kill her. Whoever spread those rumors, whoever convinced me and everyone else that Lily was someone she wasn't, that person killed her. It was powerful testimony, and the jury was clearly moved. Several jurors looked at Olivia with barely concealed hostility. Pemberton's cross-examination focused on establishing that Oliver had no direct evidence Olivia had started the rumors. Mr. Matthews, you testified that you heard Olivia was the source of rumors after Lily's death. Who told you this? Other students. People who said Olivia had told them things about Lily. But you never personally heard Olivia start a rumor? No. So your testimony is based on hearsay. What other people told you that Olivia allegedly said? I guess. And these rumors you heard about Lily, the cheating, the stealing, did you ever find any evidence they were true or false? No, I believed people when they said those things. So you broke up with Lily based on unverified gossip, and now you're looking for someone to blame for the fact that you made a choice you regret? Fletcher stood. Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative and badgering the witness. Sustained. Miss Pemberton, move on. No further questions. By the end of the first week of trial, the prosecution had established a pattern of deterioration in Lily's mental health, social isolation, and rumors that seemed to originate with Olivia. But Pemberton had successfully poked holes in much of the testimony. Everything was either circumstantial, hearsay, or based on assumptions rather than direct evidence. The critical moment came in week 2, when the prosecution called its digital forensics expert, Dr. James Hutchinson. Dr. Hutchinson was a slight man in his early 40s with thick glasses and the enthusiastic demeanor of someone who genuinely loved his highly technical work. He'd been brought in by the police to analyze all digital communications between Lily, Olivia, and the fake social media accounts that had harassed Lily in the months before her death. After establishing his credentials, PhD in computer science, 15 years doing forensic work for law enforcement, Fletcher walked him through his findings. Dr. Hutchinson, can you explain what you were asked to analyze in this case? I was provided with Lily Chen's phone, laptop, and tablet, as well as Olivia Ashworth's phone and laptop. I was asked to examine all communications between them, as well as to trace the origins of several fake social media accounts that had sent messages to Lily. What did you find? Between January and March of this year, Lily received hundreds of messages from accounts with names like Truth Teller 2024, Who Cares 101, and Stop Lying 456. These accounts sent messages telling Lily that nobody liked her, that she should kill herself, that the world would be better without her. Disturbing content. Were you able to determine who controlled these accounts? 2 of the 3 accounts were created using IP addresses associated with St. Catherine's Academy's Wi-Fi network. Without access to the school's detailed network logs, I couldn't determine which specific device created them. The 3rd account was created using a VPN, which masked the original IP address. So you couldn't definitively trace these accounts to Olivia Ashworth? Not with 100% certainty, no. However, I did find something interesting. All 3 accounts use similar phrasing and vocabulary patterns. When I ran a linguistic analysis comparing the messages from these accounts to known writings by Olivia Ashworth, her text messages, her social media posts, I found significant overlap in word choice, sentence structure, and stylistic quirks. Fletcher pulled up comparison charts on the courtroom screen, showing phrases that appeared in both Olivia's known communications and the fake account messages. Can you explain what we're looking at here? This chart shows common phrases. For example, Olivia frequently uses the word literally as an intensifier, often incorrectly from a grammatical standpoint. She writes things like "You're literally the worst" or "This is literally so dumb." The fake accounts also use "literally" with the same frequency and in the same grammatically incorrect way. Is this conclusive proof Olivia controlled the accounts? On its own, no. Literally is a common word among teenagers. But when you combine it with dozens of other similarities, specific emoji usage, particular slang terms, even similar typos, the probability that someone else coincidentally wrote exactly like Olivia becomes vanishingly small. In your professional opinion, who controlled these fake accounts? Based on the linguistic analysis, the IP address data, and the timing of the messages, which often came shortly after Olivia had been active on her own social media, I believe Olivia Ashworth controlled all 3 fake accounts. Thank you, Dr. Hutchinson. Now, I'd like to turn to direct communications between Olivia and Lily. What did you find there? Dr. Hutchinson pulled up several text message exchanges on the screen. Starting in late January, Olivia sent Lily several messages that could be interpreted as encouraging suicide. For example, on February 3rd, after Lily sent a message saying she was feeling depressed, Olivia responded, "Maybe you should just give up. Some people aren't meant to handle life." The jury studied the text exchange, several faces registering shock. On February 17th, after Lily's breakup with Oliver, Lily texted Olivia, "I don't know if I can keep doing this." Olivia responded, "Then don't. Nobody would blame you for taking the easy way out." More shocked faces. Olivia sat perfectly still at the defense table, her expression carefully neutral. And on March 10th, just 4 days before Lily's death, Lily texted Olivia, "Sometimes I think about ending it all." Olivia's response, "Do what you need to do. You don't owe anyone your suffering." Dr. Hutchinson, how do you interpret these messages? Objection, Pemberton called. The witness is here to testify about technical findings, not to interpret meaning. Sustained. Rephrase, Mr. Fletcher. Dr. Hutchinson, in your analysis of these messages, did you find any instances where Olivia tried to talk Lily out of suicidal thoughts? No. In fact, I found a pattern where whenever Lily expressed dark thoughts, Olivia's responses either validated those thoughts or actively encouraged them. Thank you. Now, let's discuss the song Shatter by Echo Bloom that Lily listened to repeatedly before her death. Did you find any evidence that Olivia recommended this song to Lily? This was the moment Fletcher had been building toward. He saw several jurors lean forward, sensing something significant. Yes, Dr. Hutchinson said. On February 25th, there was a Spotify group chat between Olivia, Lily, and 2 other students. Olivia shared the song Shatter with the group along with the message, "This song is literally so perfect for when you're feeling like you can't go on. Like it gets exactly what it's like to want everything to stop." Fletcher displayed the Spotify chat on the screen. There it was, in black and white, Olivia specifically sharing a song about wanting to die with a group that included Lily. Is there any indication that Lily listened to this song after Olivia shared it? Yes. Spotify's listening history shows that Lily began listening to Shatter within hours of Olivia sharing it. And she then listened to it repeatedly, 583 times between February 25th and March 14th. 583 times in 17 days. That's an average of, Fletcher calculated quickly, about 34 times per day. Yes. The listening data shows she played it on loop for hours at a time, particularly in the week before her death. Dr. Hutchinson, did you analyze the lyrics of this song? I did. At the prosecution's request, I compiled the full lyrics and analyzed them for content. Fletcher introduced a printout of the song lyrics as evidence. Copies were distributed to the jury, and several jurors read them with increasing distress. The lyrics were dark, brutally, explicitly dark. They described feeling shattered and broken, being a burden to others, wanting to disappear, questioning whether anyone would even notice if the singer was gone. But there was one verse, one specific set of lines that made Fletcher's case. He read them aloud. "Tell them all you're sorry, leave a note beside your bed, make it look like your decision. Not the voice inside your head, they'll call it tragedy, not murder when you're finally gone, and free the perfect crime is when the victim does exactly what you need." The courtroom was dead silent. The implications of those lyrics hung in the air like a physical presence. "Dr. Hutchinson," Fletcher said quietly, "when the song's lyrics say, 'Make it look like your decision, not the voice inside your head,' and 'the perfect crime is when the victim does exactly what you need,' what do those lines suggest to you?" Objection, Pemberton said quickly. Calls for speculation and interpretation. "Your Honor," Fletcher argued, Dr. Hutchinson is testifying as an expert in digital communications and patterns of behavior. His interpretation of how this song might be used is relevant. Judge Harrington considered. I'll allow limited testimony. Dr. Hutchinson, you may answer, but stick to factual observations rather than conclusions. Dr. Hutchinson nodded. Those lyrics explicitly describe a scenario where someone convinces another person to commit suicide in a way that appears to be the victim's own choice. The phrase, perfect crime, suggests deliberate intent to cause death while avoiding criminal liability. And Olivia specifically recommended this song to Lily and the group, characterizing it as perfect for when you're feeling like you can't go on? Yes, that's correct. Fletcher let the jury absorb this information. Several jurors were rereading the lyrics, their expressions ranging from shock to anger. One older man in the back row was shaking his head slowly, his judgment clearly formed. Dr. Hutchinson, in your examination of Olivia's digital communications, did you find any evidence that she shared this song with anyone else? Or was Lily the primary recipient of this recommendation? The Spotify share went to 4 people including Lily, but in the weeks that followed, Olivia sent the song again directly to Lily twice. Once on March 5th with the message, "Still thinking of you when I hear this," and again on March 12th, just 2 days before Lily's death, with no accompanying message, just the song link. So Olivia repeatedly, specifically directed Lily's attention to a song whose lyrics essentially provide a blueprint for how to convince someone to commit suicide while making it look like their own choice? Objection. Pemberton was on her feet. Counsel is testifying, not questioning. This is highly prejudicial. Sustained. Mr. Fletcher asked questions. Fletcher nodded. Dr. Hutchinson, based on your analysis of all the digital evidence, the fake accounts, the text messages encouraging Lily towards suicide, and the repeated sharing of a song with explicit lyrics about making someone's death look like their own choice, what conclusions can you draw? Objection calls for speculation beyond the witness's expertise. Judge Harrington looked at Fletcher. Rephrase. What did your analysis of the pattern of communication reveal? It revealed a sustained, systematic campaign over approximately 2 months where Olivia Ashworth isolated Lily Chen from her support systems, sent her messages encouraging suicide both directly and through fake accounts, and directed her attention to media content that validated and encouraged suicidal ideation. The pattern is consistent with deliberate manipulation rather than coincidental teenage drama. Thank you. No further questions. Pemberton approached for cross-examination, knowing this witness had significantly damaged her case but determined to create whatever doubt she could. Dr. Hutchinson, you testified that you couldn't definitively prove Olivia controlled the fake social media accounts. Is that correct? That's correct. The evidence is strongly suggestive but not 100% conclusive. So it's possible someone else created those accounts using similar language patterns and school Wi-Fi access? It's possible, though unlikely. But possible. Now, regarding the text messages you characterized as encouraging suicide, isn't it true that those messages could be interpreted differently depending on context and tone? For example, when Olivia wrote, "You don't owe anyone your suffering," couldn't that be read as supportive rather than encouraging self-harm? It could be read that way, yes. And when she wrote, "Do what you need to do," couldn't that mean, do what you need to do to take care of your mental health, rather than do what you need to do to kill yourself? That's one possible interpretation. So these messages are ambiguous, requiring interpretation rather than being explicit instructions to commit suicide? They're ambiguous in isolation. But in the context of the overall pattern of communication, they take on a more sinister meaning. But that's your interpretation based on hindsight and the outcome. Correct. It's my interpretation based on analyzing the complete body of evidence, yes. Pemberton moved to the song lyrics. Dr. Hutchinson, you made much of the song Shatter and its lyrics. Are you familiar with this band, Echo Bloom? Not prior to this case, no. Echo Bloom is quite popular among teenagers, isn't it? The song Shatter has over 50 million streams on Spotify. I wasn't aware of the specific number, but yes, it appears to be popular. So when Olivia shared this song with her friends, including Lily, she was sharing a popular song that millions of teenagers listen to. Is that fair to say? That's accurate. And is there any evidence that Olivia told Lily, listen to this song and follow its instructions or anything explicit like that? No. The only accompanying messages were the ones I mentioned earlier. Messages that could be interpreted as simply sharing music with friends, which is a common teenage behavior? That's one interpretation. Dr. Hutchinson, I pulled the listening histories of the other 3 people Olivia shared this song with. None of them killed themselves. In fact, 2 of them listened to it only once or twice and then moved on. If Olivia's intent was to use this song as a weapon to drive people to suicide, why did it only affect Lily? Dr. Hutchinson paused, considering his answer carefully. Lily was uniquely vulnerable due to her pre-existing mental health conditions and the isolation she was experiencing. The same message that might not affect a mentally healthy person could be devastating to someone in Lily's state. So Lily's pre-existing mental health conditions were a significant factor in her death? They were a factor, yes. But they were exploited and weaponized by whoever was sending her these messages. Or they were simply the underlying cause of a tragic suicide, and you're seeing patterns that aren't there because you've been hired to support the prosecution's theory? Objection, Fletcher called out. Argumentative. Sustained. Pemberton knew she'd made her point. No further questions. The digital forensics testimony had been damaging, but Pemberton had created some space for doubt. The messages were ambiguous. The song was commercially popular. The fake accounts couldn't be definitively traced to Olivia. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to work with. The prosecution's final witness before resting its case was the one everyone had been waiting for. Witness A, the student who'd come forward with the damning text message where Olivia had allegedly stated her intention to make Lily kill herself. Witness A testified under the pseudonym Sarah, to protect her identity. She was 18, having graduated from St. Catherine's over the summer, and she wore her nervousness visibly, fidgeting with her hands, speaking quietly, occasionally looking at Olivia with what appeared to be fear. Sarah, Fletcher began gently, can you tell us how you knew Olivia Ashworth? We were friends. Part of the same social group at school. Not super close, but we hung out regularly. And did you know Lily Chen? I knew who she was. We weren't friends, but St. Catherine's isn't that big, so you know everyone at least casually. Can you describe Olivia's relationship with Lily before January of this year? They were best friends. Inseparable. They did everything together. But then Oliver Matthews started dating Lily instead of Olivia, and everything changed. How did it change? Olivia got really cold toward Lily. She started making snide comments about her, saying Lily had betrayed her, that kind of thing. At first I thought it was just hurt feelings that they'd work it out. But it kept getting worse. Can you describe a conversation you had with Olivia on February 16th? Sarah took a deep breath, clearly steeling herself. We were at Olivia's house after school. It was just the 2 of us. Olivia was really worked up about something, pacing around her room. She started talking about how much she hated Lily, how Lily had ruined everything. What exactly did she say? She said. Sarah glanced at her phone, where she'd apparently kept notes to remember the exact wording. She said, I'm going to destroy her so completely that she'll have no choice but to end it. And everyone will just think she was too fragile to handle life. Perfect crime. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Harrington's gavel came down. Order. What was your reaction when Olivia said this? Fletcher asked. I was shocked. I asked if she was serious and she laughed and said, I'm deadly serious. I told her that was crazy, that she couldn't make someone kill themselves. And she said, watch me. Lily's already halfway there. All I have to do is push a little harder. Did you take her seriously at the time? I didn't know what to think. It seemed so extreme, so impossible. I thought maybe she was just venting, saying things she didn't mean. So I didn't do anything. And I've regretted that every single day since Lily died. Sarah was crying now, her guilt evident. When did you decide to come forward with this information? About 3 weeks after Lily's death. I was going through old text messages, and I found our conversation from later that same day, February 16th. After I'd left Olivia's house, I texted my boyfriend about what she'd said, because I was disturbed by it. When I read that text again after Lily was dead, I realized I had evidence that Olivia had planned this. So I went to the police. Fletcher introduced the text message exchange between Sarah and her boyfriend into evidence. The text read, just left Olivia's. She said some really scary stuff about Lily. Like she wants to make her kill herself. I don't know if she's serious or just being dramatic. Should I tell someone? Her boyfriend had responded, that's messed up, but probably just talk. Everyone says crazy shit when they're mad. Sarah, why didn't you tell someone at the time? Because I didn't think she could actually do it. And I was scared. Olivia was popular, influential. If I'd reported her and nothing had happened, she would have made my life hell. So I convinced myself she was just talking. Do you regret that decision? Every day. If I'd spoken up, maybe Lily would still be alive. Thank you, Sarah. No further questions. Pemberton approached for what would be the most critical cross-examination of the trial. Sarah, you testified that you and Olivia were friends. Were you close friends? Not super close, but we were friendly. Did you ever have any conflicts with Olivia? Not really. Pemberton pulled up Sarah's social media history. Isn't it true that in December of last year, you and Olivia had an argument at a party about a boy you were both interested in? Sarah looked uncomfortable. That was a minor thing. We got over it. Did you get over it? Because according to your Instagram posts from late December, you referred to Olivia as fake and backstabbing. Those don't sound like words you'd use for someone you were friends with. I was upset about the party, but we moved past it. Did you? Or did you harbor resentment that might motivate you to come forward with accusations after Lily's death? That's not why I came forward. I came forward because Olivia said she was going to make Lily kill herself, and then Lily killed herself. But we only have your word that Olivia said those things. The text message you sent your boyfriend doesn't quote Olivia directly, it's your paraphrase of what she supposedly said. Correct. I paraphrased, yes, but the meaning was the same. Or you paraphrased in a way that made it sound worse than it actually was, because you were already biased against Olivia from your earlier conflict? No, that's not. Sarah, isn't it true that you deleted the original text message to Olivia that you sent that evening? The message where you confronted her about what she'd said. Sarah hesitated. I deleted a lot of old messages. I wasn't trying to hide anything. How convenient that the only message that survived was the one to your boyfriend, which supports your version of events, while any messages that might show Olivia's actual response or provide context have been deleted. I didn't delete them on purpose to help the prosecution. I just clean out my messages periodically. And when did you clean out the messages with Olivia? Before or after you decided to go to the police? Sarah looked trapped. I'm not sure exactly when. Could it have been after, when you realized those messages might contradict the story you wanted to tell? Objection. Fletcher was on his feet. Counsel is accusing the witness of perjury without any evidence. Sustained. Miss Pemberton, unless you have evidence that the witness deliberately destroyed evidence, move on. Pemberton nodded, but she'd planted the seed. The jury would wonder whether Sarah's testimony was entirely reliable or colored by her own agenda. Sarah, you testified that you thought Olivia was just venting when she made these alleged statements. What changed your mind? Lily dying changed my mind. So prior to Lily's death, you didn't believe Olivia was serious? I wasn't sure. And if Lily had gone to therapy, adjusted her medication, and recovered from her depression, you would never have reported this conversation to anyone? I guess not. So your interpretation of Olivia's words as a serious threat rather than teenage hyperbole is entirely dependent on the outcome, on Lily's death, not on anything inherent in what Olivia actually said? Sarah struggled to answer. I think she meant it when she said it. But you didn't think so at the time. You only decided she meant it after the worst possible outcome occurred. Maybe. But she still said it and then Lily died. Or Lily, suffering from severe depression and pre-existing suicidal ideation, made a tragic choice that had nothing to do with anything Olivia said in private to you. No further questions. Sarah stepped down looking shaken and the prosecution rested its case. The defense's case was more straightforward. Pemberton called several character witnesses who testified about Olivia's good behavior, her academic excellence, her volunteer work. She called a psychologist who testified that teenagers often say dramatic things they don't mean. She called a digital forensics expert who disagreed with Dr. Hutchinson's conclusions about the fake social media accounts, arguing that the linguistic analysis was too imprecise to definitively link them to Olivia. But Pemberton's key strategic decision was whether to put Olivia on the stand. During a recess, she discussed it with Olivia and her parents. If you testify, you'll have a chance to tell your side of the story, Pemberton explained. You can express remorse for Lily's death, explain that your messages were taken out of context, humanize yourself to the jury. But you'll also be subject to cross-examination from Fletcher, and he's very good. He'll try to trip you up, make you lose your composure, get you to say something damaging. What do you recommend? James Ashworth asked. Honestly, I think it's too risky. The prosecution's case has weaknesses. The fake accounts can't be definitively traced to Olivia, the text messages are ambiguous, Sarah's testimony is undermined by her credibility issues. If we rest without putting Olivia on the stand, the jury has to decide the case based on the evidence presented, which creates reasonable doubt. If Olivia testifies and Fletcher gets her to admit to things that sound bad, we lose that advantage. But won't the jury wonder why she didn't testify? Catherine asked. Won't they think she has something to hide? The judge will instruct them that they cannot draw any negative inference from a defendant choosing not to testify. It's her constitutional right. They all looked at Olivia. She'd been quiet during this discussion, her expression contemplative. I want to testify, she said finally. Olivia, I strongly advise against. I need to tell my side. I need them to hear from me that I didn't kill Lily, that I loved her, that I'm devastated she's gone. If I don't testify, they'll convict me based on speculation and circumstantial evidence. But if I testify, maybe I can make them see the truth. Pemberton studied her client. Olivia seemed sincere, composed, confident. But Pemberton had seen confident defendants crumble under cross-examination countless times. If you testify and it goes badly, there's no taking it back. You understand that? I understand. But I need to try. And so, on the afternoon of day 12 of the trial, Olivia Ashworth took the stand. She was sworn in and sat down, her posture perfect, her hands folded in her lap, her expression somber but composed. Pemberton walked her through carefully prepared direct examination. Olivia, how long had you known Lily Chen? Since we were 11. We both started at St. Catherine's in year 7, and we became friends almost immediately. She was my best friend for 6 years. Can you describe your relationship with her? We were really close. We told each other everything. We had sleepovers every weekend. We supported each other through difficult times. She helped me when my grandmother died. I helped her when she was first diagnosed with depression. We were like sisters. What happened when Lily started dating Oliver Matthews? Olivia's voice wavered slightly, a calculated show of emotion. I was hurt. Not because I was in love with Oliver or anything like that. We'd kissed once at a party, but it didn't mean anything. I was hurt because Lily knew I'd kissed Oliver, and she started dating him anyway without talking to me about it first. It felt like a betrayal. Did your friendship with Lily change after she started dating Oliver? Yes. There was tension. We weren't as close. We both said things we regretted. But I never wanted to hurt her. I never wanted her to die. Olivia, the prosecution has presented evidence of text messages you sent to Lily that they characterize as encouraging suicide. Can you explain those messages? Olivia looked directly at the jury, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Those messages were taken completely out of context. When I wrote, maybe you should just give up, I meant give up on trying to please everyone, not give up on life. When I wrote, do what you need to do, I meant do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. Go to therapy more, talk to your parents, take time off school. I never ever intended those messages to encourage suicide. Did you create fake social media accounts to harass Lily? No, absolutely not. I would never do that. Lily was my friend. When I heard she was getting cruel messages from anonymous accounts, I was angry on her behalf. I tried to help her figure out who was behind them. What about the song Shatter? Why did you share that with Lily? It's a popular song. I shared it with a group of friends because I thought the melody was beautiful. Yes, the lyrics are dark, but lots of popular music is dark. That doesn't mean everyone who listens to it is going to kill themselves. I never told Lily to listen to that song as some kind of instruction manual. That's insane. Did you ever tell Sarah, witness A, that you were going to destroy Lily or make her kill herself? No, never. Sarah and I had a falling out over a boy in December. She's been hostile toward me ever since. I think she saw an opportunity to hurt me by coming forward with these accusations and she took it. Maybe she even convinced herself her story was true. But I never said those things. Olivia, did you kill Lily Chen? Olivia's voice broke. No, I didn't kill her. I lost my best friend, and now I'm being blamed for her death when all I did was try to navigate a complicated friendship during a difficult time. Lily was sick. She had depression. She made a choice, and it's a choice I'll never understand or forgive myself for not preventing. But I didn't make her do it. Pemberton let Olivia's tears flow for a moment, giving the jury time to see her emotion, before gently concluding her direct examination. Thank you, Olivia. No further questions. Martin Fletcher stood for cross-examination, and the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the prosecution's chance to dismantle Olivia's carefully constructed narrative. Miss Ashworth, Fletcher began, his tone deceptively mild, you testified that your messages to Lily were taken out of context. Let's look at them in context. He pulled up the full text exchange from February 17th, the day after Lily's breakup with Oliver. Lily, I don't know if I can keep doing this. Everything hurts so much. Olivia, Then don't. Nobody would blame you for taking the easy way out. Lily, what do you mean? Olivia, you know what I mean. Fletcher looked at Olivia. Can you explain to the jury what easy way out means in this context, if not suicide? I meant taking a break from school. Taking time to focus on her mental health. But when Lily asked what you meant, you said, you know what I mean. If you meant something innocent like taking a break from school, why wouldn't you just say that directly? I don't know. It was a private conversation. I assumed she'd understand. Or you deliberately left it ambiguous so you could later claim you meant something innocent, while in the moment, Lily would understand you were talking about suicide? No, that's not. Let's look at another message. March 10th, 4 days before Lily's death. Lily wrote to you, sometimes I think about ending it all. You responded, do what you need to do. You don't owe anyone your suffering. Correct. Yes, but Miss Ashworth, when someone tells you they're thinking about ending it all, and you respond, do what you need to do, how is any reasonable person supposed to interpret that as anything other than encouragement to commit suicide? I was trying to be supportive. I was saying she didn't have to suffer, that she should take steps to feel better. If that's what you meant, why didn't you say, please talk to your therapist, or call the suicide hotline, or let me help you? Why did you say, do what you need to do? Olivia struggled. I could have phrased it better. But I didn't mean it the way you're making it sound. Fletcher moved to the song. You testified that you shared Shatter because you thought the melody was beautiful and lots of music is dark. Are you familiar with all the lyrics of that song? Generally, yes. So you were aware of the verse that says, the perfect crime is when the victim does exactly what you need? Yes, but. And you shared this song, which explicitly describes how to make someone's suicide look like their own choice, with Lily, knowing she was suicidally depressed? I shared it with a group of friends. It wasn't targeted specifically at Lily. But you then sent it to Lily directly 2 more times. March 5th and March 12th. Why? I thought she'd like the music. Or you were using that song's lyrics as a blueprint for exactly what you were doing, manipulating Lily into killing herself while making it look like her own choice? No. Fletcher pulled up the Spotify group chat where Olivia had first shared the song. You wrote, and I quote, this song is literally so perfect for when you're feeling like you can't go on. Why would you describe a song as perfect for when you can't go on, unless you were specifically recommending it to people experiencing suicidal ideation? It's just a figure of speech. Teenagers say things like that about sad songs all the time. Do they? Or is that a very specific description that only makes sense if you're recommending a song to someone you know is suicidal? Olivia had no good answer. Fletcher pressed his advantage. Miss Ashworth, you testified that Sarah, witness A, made up her story about you saying you wanted to make Lily kill herself. But isn't it true that Sarah sent a text to her boyfriend about this conversation on the same day it allegedly happened, weeks before Lily's death? She could have made it up then too. Why would she do that? What motive would she have to fabricate such a specific, disturbing story weeks before Lily died, if it wasn't true? We'd had a fight. She wanted to make me look bad. So she fabricated a story about you planning to drive someone to suicide, texted her boyfriend about it, and then waited months to see if it would somehow become relevant? That seems extraordinarily prescient of her, doesn't it? Olivia's composure was starting to crack. I don't know why she did it. I just know I never said those things. Fletcher pulled up the linguistic analysis comparing Olivia's writing to the fake account messages. Dr. Hutchinson testified that these anonymous accounts that harassed Lily used the same vocabulary, phrasing, and even typos as your known communications. Can you explain that? Lots of people at our school talk the same way. We pick up each other's slang and phrases. But these accounts also used very specific quirks of your writing, like consistently misspelling definitely as definitely, a mistake you make regularly in your text messages. How many other students at St. Catherine's make that exact same spelling error? I don't know. Maybe it's common. Or maybe you controlled those accounts and you're lying about it to avoid responsibility for your actions? Objection. Pemberton called. Argumentative. Withdrawn. Miss Ashworth, when Lily died, how did you react? The question seemed to catch Olivia off guard. I was devastated. Were you? Because according to your social media posts from the week after Lily's death, you went to a party, posted photos with the caption, "Living my best life," and made no mention of your supposedly best friend who just died. Olivia's face flushed. Everyone grieves differently. I was trying to cope by maintaining normalcy. Or you weren't grieving at all because you'd gotten exactly what you wanted? Lily gone and no connection between her death and your actions? That's not true. Miss Ashworth, one final question. If you could go back to February 17th, when Lily texted you saying she couldn't keep doing this, what would you say to her? Olivia looked at the jury, clearly trying to craft an answer that would redeem her. I would tell her that life gets better, that she's loved, that she should talk to her therapist and her parents, that she has so much to live for. But you didn't say any of those things then, did you? Instead, you told her to take the easy way out, and that nobody would blame her. Why? Olivia had no answer. She sat in the witness box, tears streaming down her face, her carefully constructed facade finally crumbling. No further questions. The damage was done. Olivia's testimony, which was supposed to humanize her and create doubt, had instead revealed the hollowness of her defense. The jury had seen her struggle to explain away messages that clearly encouraged suicide. They'd heard her fumble when confronted with the song lyrics. They'd watched her composure crack under Fletcher's methodical questioning. Pemberton tried to rehabilitate her on redirect examination, but the holes in Olivia's story were too large. When she finally stepped down from the witness stand, she looked like what she was, a 17-year-old girl who'd made terrible choices and was now facing the consequences. The defense rested, and the case moved to closing arguments. Fletcher's closing was powerful and emotional. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past 2 weeks, you've heard evidence of a systematic campaign to destroy Lily Chen's mental health and drive her to suicide. You've seen text messages where the defendant encouraged Lily toward death. You've heard testimony about fake accounts spreading rumors and sending cruel messages. You've learned about a song the defendant repeatedly recommended to Lily, a song whose lyrics literally describe how to make someone's suicide look like their own choice. The defendant wants you to believe this is all coincidence, that her encouraging messages were misinterpreted, that the song was just popular music, that someone else created the fake accounts using writing patterns that just happened to match hers perfectly. But when you look at all the evidence together, the only reasonable conclusion is that Olivia Ashworth deliberately, calculatedly pushed Lily Chen towards suicide, and then tried to cover her tracks by making it look like a tragic but ordinary suicide. Lily Chen was only 16 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. And that life was stolen from her by someone she trusted, someone who knew exactly how vulnerable she was and exploited that vulnerability for revenge over a boy. That's not teenage drama. That's murder. And I'm asking you to hold Olivia Ashworth accountable by finding her guilty. Pemberton's closing emphasized reasonable doubt. The prosecution has built its entire case on speculation and assumption. They speculate that Olivia controlled fake accounts, though they can't prove it. They assume her messages encouraged suicide, though those messages are ambiguous. They've connected dots that don't necessarily connect, creating a conspiracy theory where the simpler explanation is that a depressed teenager tragically took her own life. Olivia Ashworth is not a murderer. She's a teenager who said thoughtless things during a difficult period of friendship strain. Things she regrets, things she wishes she could take back, but things that don't constitute criminal conduct. The law doesn't criminalize being a bad friend. It doesn't criminalize sharing popular music or sending ambiguous text messages. It criminalizes murder, and the prosecution has not proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Olivia murdered anyone. The jury deliberated for 3 days. They reviewed the text messages. They studied the song lyrics. They debated the credibility of witness A's testimony. They argued about whether Olivia's messages were genuinely encouraging suicide or could be interpreted innocently. On the 3rd day, they sent a note to Judge Harrington: "We have reached a verdict." The courtroom was packed when everyone reassembled. The Chen family sat in their usual spot, holding hands. The Ashworths sat ramrod straight, their faces masks of forced calm. Olivia sat at the defense table looking pale and drawn, having barely slept during the deliberations. Judge Harrington addressed the jury foreman, a middle-aged black woman who worked as a teacher. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." "Please hand the verdict form to the bailiff." The bailiff walked the form to the judge, who reviewed it impassively before handing it to the court clerk. "The clerk will read the verdict." The clerk stood. "In the matter of the Crown versus Olivia Catherine Ashworth, on the charge of murder, we the jury find the defendant guilty." The courtroom erupted. Susan Chin sobbed openly, her husband holding her as she collapsed against him in relief. David Chin stared straight ahead, tears streaming down his face, finally allowing himself to feel the weight of what they'd been carrying for 8 months. Catherine Ashworth screamed, "No!" and reached for her daughter. James sat frozen, his face white with shock. Olivia herself made no sound, just stared at the jury with blank, hollow eyes, as if she couldn't quite process what had just happened. Order. Judge Harrington's gavel came down repeatedly. I will have order in this court. The noise subsided and the clerk continued reading. On the charge of conspiracy to cause harm, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of perverting the course of justice, we find the defendant guilty. Judge Harrington looked at Olivia. Miss Ashworth, the jury has found you guilty on all charges. You will be remanded into custody pending sentencing. Sentencing is scheduled for 4 weeks from today. Bailiff. A female bailiff approached the defense table. Olivia stood shakily, and the bailiff placed handcuffs on her wrists. It was the first time Olivia had truly looked her age, no longer the composed, mature-seeming girl who'd sat through the trial, but a frightened teenager facing the destruction of her life. As she was led from the courtroom, she looked back at her parents one last time. Catherine was still crying. James met his daughter's eyes, and for just a moment, his carefully controlled expression cracked, revealing the devastation beneath. Then Olivia was gone, led through the side door to the holding cells, and the courtroom slowly emptied. Outside, Martin Fletcher gave a brief statement to the press. Today, justice was served for Lily Chen and her family. This verdict sends a clear message that if you deliberately drive someone to suicide, you will be held accountable for murder. We hope this provides some measure of closure for the Chen family, though we know nothing can bring Lily back. David Chen also spoke, his voice steady despite his tears. Our daughter was stolen from us by someone we trusted, someone we welcomed into our home. Lily's death was not inevitable. It was not simply the result of her depression. It was murder, carefully planned and executed, and today the jury recognized that truth. We're grateful, but we're also still heartbroken. No verdict can bring Lily back. All we can hope is that her story prevents other families from experiencing this kind of loss. 4 weeks later, Olivia returned to court for sentencing. The intervening weeks had changed her visibly. She'd lost weight. Her hair, previously perfectly maintained, hung limp and unwashed. She wore the same prison-issue tracksuit she'd been wearing in custody, and she moved with the shuffling gait of someone who'd been broken. Judge Harrington reviewed the sentencing submissions. The prosecution sought life imprisonment with a minimum term of 15 years. The defense argued for the minimum sentence possible, emphasizing Olivia's age, her previously clean record, and her remorse. Pemberton called several witnesses to speak on Olivia's behalf. Teachers who described her as a model student, a psychologist who testified about her mental health struggles in custody, even her parents who begged for leniency for their only child. But then the Chen family spoke. David Chen took the stand and described life without Lily. The permanent grief that colored every moment. Alex's nightmares and need for trauma therapy. Susan's breakdown and hospitalization for depression. The destruction of their family. Olivia Ashworth killed our daughter as surely as if she'd pushed her off a building, David said, his voice firm. She did it methodically, deliberately, over weeks and months, using psychology instead of physical weapons. And she did it to a child who trusted her, who thought she was a friend. That betrayal, that cruelty, demands the strongest possible sentence. When everyone had spoken, Judge Harrington delivered her sentence. Olivia Ashworth, you have been convicted of the murder of Lily Chen. This is not a conventional murder case. You did not use physical violence. You used something more insidious. You weaponized your intimate knowledge of Lily's vulnerabilities, her mental health struggles, and her trust in you to drive her systematically toward self-destruction. The judge's voice was measured but carried unmistakable condemnation. The evidence showed that you created or controlled social media accounts to harass Lily. You spread malicious rumors that isolated her from her peers. You sent her messages that, far from supporting her through her depression, actively encouraged her toward suicide. And most calculating of all, you repeatedly directed her attention to a song whose lyrics provided a blueprint for exactly what you were doing, making her death appear to be her own choice while you orchestrated it from the shadows. Olivia stood perfectly still, staring at a point on the wall behind the judge. What makes your crime particularly heinous is the betrayal it represents. Lily trusted you. She believed you were her friend. She confided her deepest fears and vulnerabilities to you. And you used every piece of that intimate knowledge to destroy her. This was not a crime of passion. This was not a momentary lapse of judgment. This was sustained, calculated psychological torture culminating in death. Judge Harrington consulted her notes. I've considered the submissions from both sides. Your counsel has emphasized your age, your clean record, your academic promise. And these are factors I must weigh. You were 17 at the time of the offense. Your brain was not fully developed. You have capacity for change and rehabilitation. But I must balance these considerations against the severity of your crime and the need to protect society and deter others from similar conduct. She looked directly at Olivia. This court has reviewed psychological evaluations indicating you display traits consistent with narcissistic personality disorder and a lack of genuine empathy. The psychologist who evaluated you noted that while you express appropriate words of remorse, your affect is flat, suggesting you understand intellectually that you should feel guilty but don't genuinely experience that emotion. This concerns me greatly regarding your capacity for rehabilitation. Catherine Ashworth let out a small sob. James gripped her hand tightly. However, I am mindful that you were legally a child when you committed this offense, and the law recognizes that children, even those who commit terrible crimes, are entitled to some hope of eventual redemption. Judge Harrington opened her sentencing folder. On the charge of murder, I sentence you to life imprisonment. You will serve a minimum term of 14 years before you are eligible for parole. On the charges of conspiracy to cause harm and perverting the course of justice, I sentence you to 5 years each, to be served concurrently with the life sentence. Olivia swayed slightly as if the words had physical weight. This means you will be at least 31 years old before you can even be considered for parole. And I note for the parole board's future reference that parole should only be granted if you demonstrate genuine rehabilitation, genuine understanding of the harm you caused, and genuine remorse, not the performative remorse you displayed at trial, but authentic emotional growth. The judge paused. Additionally, I am issuing a lifelong restraining order preventing you from contacting any member of the Chen family. When you are eventually released, if you are released, you are prohibited from writing about this case, giving interviews, or profiting in any way from Lily's death. Her story is not yours to tell. Judge Harrington looked at the Chen family. I hope this sentence provides some measure of justice for Lily and for your family. Though nothing can restore what you have lost, I hope knowing that Olivia Ashworth will face consequences for her actions offers some small comfort. She returned her attention to Olivia. Miss Ashworth, I hope you use your time in prison to truly reflect on what you have done. Not to craft a narrative that absolves you or minimizes your responsibility, but to genuinely confront the cruelty and calculation of your actions. Lily Chen deserved to live. She deserved to overcome her depression, to graduate, to pursue her dreams, to grow old. You stole all of that from her out of petty jealousy and vindictiveness. That is something you will have to live with for the rest of your life. Bailiff, remand the defendant. The gavel came down with finality. Olivia was led away, and this time she didn't look back at her parents. She walked with her head down, her shoulders slumped, a 17-year-old girl facing the reality that she would spend the next 14 years at minimum in prison. The courtroom emptied slowly. The Chen family embraced each other, crying tears of relief and ongoing grief. They would never have Lily back, but they had vindication. They had acknowledgement that what happened to their daughter was not simply tragedy but crime. Outside the courthouse, the media circus was in full swing. Legal experts debated the verdict and sentence. Some argued it was appropriate, that encouraging someone to commit suicide was indeed murder. Others worried about the precedent, about criminalizing speech and potentially chilling genuine attempts to support suicidal friends. The case became a touchstone in discussions about cyberbullying, teen mental health, and the criminal justice system's approach to psychological manipulation. The song Shatter by Echo Bloom was pulled from streaming services amid controversy, with some arguing the lyrics themselves were dangerous, others defending artistic expression. But for those directly affected, the legal proceedings were just the beginning of a much longer journey. The Chen family entered intensive grief counseling. David reduced his work hours to spend more time with Alex, who struggled with PTSD and survivor's guilt. Susan eventually returned to work but found she'd changed fundamentally. The easy optimism she'd once possessed had been replaced by a harder, more cautious approach to the world. Alex, who'd found his sister's body, suffered the most. He had nightmares for years. He developed acute anxiety around being alone and couldn't enter Lily's old room, which his parents eventually converted into a meditation space, unable to bear leaving it as a shrine but equally unable to erase every trace of their daughter. But slowly, painfully they rebuilt their lives. They established the Lily Chen Foundation, raising money for teen mental health programs and anti-cyberbullying initiatives. They spoke at schools about the warning signs of psychological abuse. They turned their grief into purpose, ensuring that Lily's death meant something, that it might prevent other families from experiencing similar loss. The Ashworth family faced a different kind of destruction. James's law firm quietly asked him to take early retirement, unable to weather the reputational damage of having a partner whose daughter was a convicted murderer. Catherine became a recluse, unable to face former friends who either blamed her for raising a monster or offered sympathy she couldn't accept. They visited Olivia in prison every month for the first year, but the visits became increasingly strained. Olivia seemed distant, detached, as if she'd retreated somewhere deep inside herself where the reality of what she'd done couldn't reach her. Eventually, the visits dwindled to quarterly, then twice a year. And Olivia herself remained an enigma. Prison psychologists worked with her, trying to address the personality disorder, the lack of empathy, the fundamental brokenness that had allowed her to destroy someone she'd once called her best friend. Some days she seemed to make progress, expressing what sounded like genuine remorse. Other days she was flat, empty, going through therapeutic motions without any real engagement. She was housed in a young offenders institution for the first 4 years, then transferred to an adult women's prison when she turned 21. She kept her head down, avoided trouble, took courses and programs. She was, by all accounts, a model prisoner. But whether that reflected genuine rehabilitation or simply her ability to perform the role expected of her remained unclear. The one thing Olivia did consistently was write. She kept journals, hundreds of pages of them over the years, processed through prison censors, analyzed by psychologists. They made for disturbing reading. In the early entries, Olivia maintained her innocence, insisting she'd been wrongly convicted, that the jury had misunderstood her intentions. She wrote angry screeds about the injustice of her situation, about how everyone had turned against her over misinterpreted text messages. But gradually, over years, the tone changed. She began to acknowledge, in small ways, that her actions had contributed to Lily's death. She stopped claiming innocence and started claiming ignorance. She hadn't understood how fragile Lily was, hadn't realized her messages would be taken literally, hadn't meant for things to go so far. Then, 5 years into her sentence, she wrote an entry that her psychologist flagged as potentially significant. "I've been thinking about the song," she wrote, "about Shatter, and why I sent it to Lily. I've told myself for years that I just thought she'd like it, that it was a coincidence that the lyrics were about suicide. But I've been lying to myself. The truth is, I knew exactly what those lyrics said. I knew exactly what message I was sending. The perfect crime is when the victim does exactly what you need. I read those lyrics and I thought, yes, that's exactly right. I wanted Lily gone. I wanted her to suffer the way I was suffering over losing Oliver. And I wanted to be clever about it, to do it in a way where I couldn't be blamed. The song was a blueprint and I followed it." The entry continued, "I don't know if I can call what I did murder. I never touched her. I never forced her to do anything. But I pushed and pushed and pushed, knowing she was already on the edge, knowing that if I pushed hard enough she'd fall. And when she did fall, I felt nothing. Not guilt, not satisfaction, just nothing. I think something is broken inside me. I don't feel things the way other people do. And I don't know if that can be fixed." The psychologist brought this entry to a case conference, debating what it meant. Was Olivia finally achieving genuine insight into her actions? Or was this another performance, saying what she thought would help her eventual parole application? The answer remained elusive. Meanwhile, the case continued to generate attention and debate. True crime podcasts dissected every detail. Law schools used it as a case study in the boundaries of criminal liability. Mental health advocates used it to argue for better support systems for depressed teenagers. Civil libertarians worried about the precedent of criminalizing speech that encouraged suicide. And every March 14th, on the anniversary of Lily's death, there would be candlelight vigils at St. Catherine's Academy, students and teachers gathering to remember the girl who'd been lost and to renew their commitment to preventing similar tragedies. 8 years into Olivia's sentence, a journalist named Rebecca Thornton secured permission to interview her for a documentary about the case. Rebecca had covered the trial initially and had maintained an interest in the story, tracking both families over the years. The interview took place in a Stark prison visiting room, with Olivia, now 25 years old, looking entirely different from the composed teenager who'd sat at the defense table. Prison had aged her. She was thinner, harder, with visible scars on her forearms from a suicide attempt 2 years earlier. "Why did you agree to this interview?" Rebecca asked. Olivia took a long time to answer. "Because I think I finally understand what I did. And I think other people need to understand too, so maybe it doesn't happen again." "What do you understand now that you didn't understand at 17? "I understand that I killed Lily. Not legally, the jury decided that, but actually, I used to tell myself that she made the choice, that she was already depressed, that I was just one factor among many. But that's bullshit. I knew exactly what I was doing. I targeted her vulnerabilities deliberately. I isolated her systematically. I sent her that song knowing what the lyrics meant, knowing what message she'd take from them. I wanted her dead and I made it happen. Rebecca leaned forward. Why did you want her dead? Jealousy. Revenge. Pettiness. She had something I wanted, Oliver's attention, and I couldn't stand it. So I decided if I couldn't have him, she didn't deserve to live. It sounds insane when I say it out loud. It sounds like the thinking of a crazy person. But that's what I thought. And I had the intelligence and the psychological knowledge to turn those thoughts into action. Do you feel remorse? Olivia's laugh was bitter. I say I do. I perform remorse for the psychologists, for the parole board eventually. But honestly, I don't know if what I feel is genuine remorse or just regret that I got caught and my life is ruined. I think about Lily sometimes. I think about her little brother finding her body. I think about her parents' pain. And I feel sad, uncomfortable. But is that remorse? Is that the appropriate guilt for taking someone's life? I don't know. I think something is genuinely broken in me, some capacity for empathy that other people have and I don't. Are you concerned that makes you dangerous? That you might hurt someone else? Every day. I'm terrified of who I am, what I'm capable of. The psychologists say I have narcissistic personality disorder, maybe antisocial traits. They say with therapy I can learn to manage it, to recognize when I'm falling into harmful patterns. But learning to manage something isn't the same as being cured. I'll always be someone who has to consciously choose not to hurt people, rather than someone who naturally doesn't want to hurt people. And that's a scary way to live. The documentary, when it aired 2 years later, caused a sensation. Many viewers felt Olivia was genuinely grappling with her actions, finally showing authentic self-awareness. Others saw it as yet another performance, a calculated attempt to appear reformed in advance of her eventual parole hearing. The Chen family refused to participate in the documentary. Through their lawyer, they issued a statement. Olivia Ashworth took our daughter from us. Nothing she says now, no amount of claimed remorse or self-awareness, can change that. We hope she remains in prison for the full extent of her sentence. Our focus is on Lily's legacy and on preventing other families from experiencing this kind of loss. When Olivia became eligible for parole at age 31, the hearing generated massive media coverage. The parole board reviewed her entire prison record, the program she'd completed, the therapy she'd undergone, her behavior reports, her psychological evaluations. They also heard testimony from the Chen family, who appeared via video link to argue strenuously against her release. Olivia Ashworth is a dangerous person, David Chen told the board. She killed my daughter using psychological manipulation, and the skills that allowed her to do that don't disappear just because she served time. She's intelligent, articulate, and capable of presenting herself however she needs to in order to get what she wants. Releasing her would be a mistake. The board also reviewed the journals, the interviews, the documentary footage. They consulted with psychologists about whether Olivia's personality disorder made her an ongoing danger to society. After deliberating for a week, they issued their decision. Parole denied. The written decision noted, while the prisoner has completed required programs and has expressed remorse, the board remains concerned about the depth and authenticity of that remorse. Psychological evaluations suggest she has learned to intellectually recognize her actions were wrong without necessarily feeling the appropriate emotional response. Given the calculated, sustained nature of her original offense and the concerns about her capacity for empathy, the board does not believe she has been adequately rehabilitated. Parole is denied. The prisoner may reapply in 3 years. Olivia received the news in her cell. According to the guard who delivered the decision, she showed no reaction at all, just nodded, said thank you, and returned to reading the book she'd been holding. Whether that lack of reaction was acceptance, depression, or the emotional flatness that had characterized her all along remained unclear. 3 years later she applied again. This time she'd completed additional therapy, including an intensive program designed specifically for offenders with personality disorders. Her psychologist testified that she'd made significant progress in developing empathy and emotional regulation. But the Chen family testified again, and their position hadn't changed. Our daughter is still dead, Susan Chen said, her voice breaking. Every day for the last 17 years, we've woken up knowing Lily isn't here, and Olivia Ashworth is the reason why. Whether or not she feels appropriately guilty about that doesn't change the fact that she's capable of that level of cruelty. Please don't release her. The board deliberated again. This time, after 2 weeks, they issued a different decision. Conditional parole granted, effective in 6 months, with extensive supervision requirements. The conditions were strict. Olivia would live in a halfway house for the first 2 years. She would be prohibited from using social media or having unsupervised internet access. She would attend mandatory therapy 3 times per week. She would be required to maintain employment and submit to random drug testing and psychological evaluations. She would have an electronic monitor tracking her location. And she would be prohibited from any contact with the Chen family or from going anywhere near St. Catherine's Academy. Any violation of these conditions would result in immediate return to prison. The news of her impending release generated predictable outrage. Victims' rights groups protested. The Chen family gave tearful interviews about their fear that Olivia might hurt someone else. Mental health advocates argued it was too soon, that personality disorders required longer treatment. But there were also those who argued she'd served her time, that she deserved a chance at rebuilding her life, that the purpose of prison was rehabilitation, not just punishment. On a cold January morning 17 years after Lily Chen's death, Olivia Ashworth walked out of HMP style wearing clothes provided by her parents, carrying a small bag of belongings, and facing an uncertain future. She was 34 years old. She'd spent nearly half her life in prison. The world she was returning to was vastly different from the one she'd left. Social media had evolved, technology had advanced, social attitudes had shifted. She'd been given a new identity to protect her from harassment, a legal name change and relocation to a city where no one knew her history. The terms of her parole prohibited her from revealing her true identity or discussing her crime publicly. She moved into the halfway house and began the slow, difficult process of reintegration. She found work at a charity shop, doing inventory and stock management, a job that didn't require background checks or extensive human interaction. She attended therapy religiously. She followed every rule of her parole to the letter. And she tried, in her limited way, to make sense of who she was now and who she might become. Meanwhile, the Chen family continued their advocacy work, now adding opposition to early release for violent offenders to their mission. They spoke at conferences about the inadequacy of the justice system, about how 17 years wasn't enough for the murder of their child. But they also focused on healing, on finding whatever peace they could. Alex, now 29, had become a therapist himself, specializing in trauma. He'd taken his own pain and transformed it into a career helping others process theirs. "I think about Lily every day," he told an interviewer for a mental health podcast. "I think about finding her, and I think about all the years we didn't get to have together. But I also think about how she'd want me to live my life. And I don't think she'd want me consumed by hatred for Olivia or frozen in that moment of trauma. So I choose to honor her by helping other people, by being the kind of person she would have been proud of." The interviewer asked if he'd ever forgive Olivia. "I don't think forgiveness is a binary thing," Alex said thoughtfully. "It's not like one day you wake up and decide you forgive someone and then it's done. It's an ongoing process. Some days I think I've forgiven her. Other days I'm angry all over again. What I can say is that I don't want revenge. I don't wish her harm. I hope she genuinely has changed and that she doesn't hurt anyone else. But I also hope I never have to see her or think about her. She took enough from my family. I'm not giving her any more of my energy." It was perhaps the healthiest attitude possible given the circumstances. As for Olivia, her story continued in obscurity. She completed her time at the halfway house without incident. She moved into a small flat in a northern English city, still under supervision but with gradually loosening restrictions. She maintained her therapy. She kept her job. She lived quietly, avoiding attention, trying to build something resembling a normal life. Whether she ever achieved genuine rehabilitation, genuine empathy, genuine remorse, remained a question without a clear answer. She performed the behaviors expected of her. She said the right things. She followed the rules. But inside, in the parts of herself she didn't share with therapists or parole officers, she remained something of a mystery even to herself. She never sought out the Chen family. She never tried to apologize or explain or ask for forgiveness. She understood that the greatest gift she could give them was her absence from their lives. And so the story ended, not with dramatic reconciliation or perfect justice, but with the messy, ambiguous reality of life after tragedy. Lily remained dead, forever 16 in her family's memories. Olivia remained broken, managing her brokenness but never quite transcending it. And the Chen family remained scarred, carrying their grief but finding ways to live with it, around it, through it. The song Shatter never returned to streaming services. Echo Bloom disbanded 2 years after the trial, unable to escape the association with Lily's death. The lyrics that had been used as a blueprint for murder were analyzed in criminal justice textbooks and psychology courses, a permanent reminder of how words and music could be weaponized. St. Catherine's Academy installed new anti-bullying programs and mental health support systems, determined never to miss warning signs again. They erected a small memorial for Lily in the school library, a bench where students could sit and read with a plaque reading, "In memory of Lily Chen. Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about." And every March 14th, the anniversary of Lily's death, David and Susan Chen would visit her grave with Alex, bringing fresh flowers and sitting in silent remembrance of the daughter and sister they'd lost. They'd talk to her, telling her about their lives, about Alex's career, about the foundation's work, about the lives they were trying to rebuild. They never mentioned Olivia. In these moments at Lily's grave, Olivia didn't exist. This time was for remembering Lily as she had been, creative, sensitive, full of potential, not for dwelling on the person who destroyed her. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. It was simply the way they'd learned to survive the unsurvivable, to keep living after the worst thing imaginable had happened. And perhaps that was the real ending of this story, not in a courtroom verdict or a prison sentence or a parole hearing, but in the quiet, ongoing choice of the Chen family to honor Lily by living, by loving, by trying to make the world a little bit better than it had been. Because that's what justice really looked like. Not perfect, not satisfying, not able to undo what had been done, but real, human, and enduring. The case of Regina versus Olivia Ashworth became a landmark in British criminal law, frequently cited in cases involving cyberbullying, encouragement of suicide, and psychological manipulation. Law students studied it. Ethicists debated it. And parents everywhere looked at their teenagers' text messages with new wariness, aware that cruelty could be delivered through screens as effectively as through fists. But more than a legal precedent, it became a story, a cautionary tale about jealousy, manipulation, mental health, and the devastating consequences when cruelty meets vulnerability. A story with no clear heroes, only victims and perpetrators, and the messy aftermath of violence. And at the center of it all, preserved forever at age 16, was Lily Chen. Not a symbol or a statistic, but a real girl who'd loved music and poetry and had died before she could discover who she might have become. Her story, more than Olivia's guilt or the Chen family's grief, became the lasting legacy of the case. Because Lily's story was a reminder that behind every headline, every court case, every crime statistic, there was a real human life with value and potential and people who loved them. And that life mattered. It had mattered when Lily was alive, and it continued to matter after her death, in the memories of those who loved her, in the advocacy work done in her name, and in the warning her story provided to a world that was still learning how much damage words could do. In the end, the song lyrics that had revealed Olivia's plot, "The perfect crime is when the victim does exactly what you need," became the most remembered element of the case. A chilling reminder that murder didn't require weapons or physical contact, only understanding of human psychology and willingness to exploit it. But those lyrics had a second meaning now, one that transcended Olivia's intentions. Because while she thought she was committing the perfect crime, the song itself had become evidence against her, its words revealing her methodology and sealing her conviction. The perfect crime had become the perfect justice in its own dark way. And Lily Chen, though gone, had the final word after all, not through her own voice, but through the music she'd listened to in her final days, music that exposed the truth of how she died and ensured her killer faced consequences. It wasn't the ending anyone would have chosen, but it was the ending they had. And they all had to find a way to live with it. The rain continued to fall on Manchester, as it had on the day of the trial, as it would on countless days to come. The city moved forward. People forgot or never knew or heard the story and shook their heads and moved on with their lives. But a small group of people would never forget. They would carry Lily's memory and the weight of what had happened to her for the rest of their lives. And that was its own form of justice. Imperfect, painful, but real.